Carolyn Holzman, and this is Confessions of an SEO. Confessions is a short-form SEO fireside chat. You're going to get an earful about search engine optimization from a technical and non-technical point of view, because I kind of see this place as a way to share my personal and professional observations. Sometimes maybe to offer help, sometimes, to vent, and sometimes to try and push our industry to a little more critical thinking approach in what we do. I spent the last 17 years as a frontline SEO, as an SEO tester, and now forensic SEO, and still solving this SEO puzzle creates such a joy in my day and in my heart for our industry and for those that we serve. So some weeks, I'll be honest, I think sometimes I'm talking to an earlier version of Carolyn as an SEO, someone who would have appreciated hearing this and perhaps find a way to add her voice to the conversation. Welcome to Season 5, Episode 31, Confessions of an SEO. And today I'm going to talk about my new project. This is the one where I'm no longer funding everyone else's retirement account, but I'm involved in that as well. This is my new and improved non-agency model, which is effectively kind of like a revenue share affiliate type arrangement with a very successful business. Now, since the idea began, of how to monetize SEO as a service, at the time, really the only type that I really noticed or heard anything about was either one, you keep going in your own business and just keep your head down and do what you do, or you expand out to offer services to other businesses. Now, I was in an industry that was doing CD and DVD manufacturing, and since that physical media option started to look less and less sustainable, I opted for the agency model because everything else sort of seemed tenuous. So now, funnily enough, even an SEO agency looks less and less sustainable. Agencies that refuse to alter what they're doing are beginning to come apart at the seams. And SEO as a service itself is in a massive disruption pattern. And we got to eat, people. We don't got to eat people. Anyway, I hope you find, as I share my journey, encouraging and uplifting as I share it. And I won't do this every week, but I think there are many of us out there that are ready to pivot and yet stay in SEO and marketing. And this particular episode, in addition to just me saying, I like what I'm doing, it's also a cautionary tale for business owners and stakeholders who, in the course of business, it seems easier to sort of hand off domains and hosting concerns to employees. Now, last week's episode was a dark to dawn evaluation on the amount of energy costs, both in terms of kilowatts and cost of infrastructure in the course of incorporating AI into our work and AI as products. And you can always find the most recent episode on confessionsofanseo.com. And if you haven't already subscribed to Confessions on whatever platform you get your podcast, just know it's a great way to support this podcast and help others find it. Now, this past week was technically my first week of my new SEO life, affiliate revenue share project. First, I can tell you how much it's sort of now with this singular focus of SEO and marketing in a very particular industry that I'm experiencing as real freedom. I even started to unsubscribe from every person, place, or thing that I'd ever purchased anything from, all their emails, marketing emails. And in doing so, I uncovered, I guess, yet another layer of its very subtle FOMO, and so I really enjoyed this week sort of starting to let that go. This project, I may have mentioned before, it's a bit of a unicorn. My client is hugely successful and without any presence online over the past 25 years, has done quite well for themselves and is totally convinced now they can do even better, but there's not a whiff of pressure, which is good because I put the pressure on myself, which is why every time I 1099 or W-2'd, when I get managed, 9 times out of 10, the techniques most managers acquire and depend on seem to be those based on the belief that everyone that they're responsible for is incapable of self-management, or they require motivation because they are mostly watching the clock or getting the job title and not pushing themselves anymore. So when that comes to motivating the majority, that may work for the majority. However, I'm in a much smaller group. I'm in a minority. Like, I'm in the 3% of people that when left alone, they can produce far more work product and results because we see our work as an entrepreneur. We own our project or our job, at least in our minds. Okay. So in fact, to try and motivate people like me with the latest techniques or assessments, that's how we get demotivated. So I'm highly motivated. So already I can tell I'm in the right place. So the first thing on the docket is a website. But before you can have a website, you gotta have a domain. And yes, there is a brand domain that has spent the last 10 years being like a one-page website, basically a visual contact us page, but nothing of substance. So with the login credentials that I'd been given access to into a domain registrar, I see that, the strategy was they had a domain that was used for a shorter email strategy, a domain that may be a partial brand but is short and memorable. So you can just simply say it to somebody and they remember it, your name at bloody. Now, in this registrar account, I cannot find the brand name domain. And right there, it's like, I've been doing this long enough to know this is going to be fun. And there's a couple ways this probably can work out, and I'm hoping it's a good one. Now, in the old days, coming to this point, I've been like, better get my, it's when I would have started drinking. Like my dad, he would track down an electrical circuit to find out what was broken. I started mapping out what I could put my hands on. At what point did things break down? And for those seasoned SEOs out there, you probably know what I'm talking about and likely where it was. It turned out my suspicions were indeed fulfilled. The former employee who had done the graphic work and had knowledge of the hosting or knew how to host had indeed purchased the brand name domain on behalf of the owner, but had purchased it through their own account. Now, each party involved had thought that it was in the owner's account somewhere, but only to ultimately discover that the domain was in this person's account since 2016 and paid for every year since then, the domain renewal, until this week's discovery. Normally, the way this ends is the designer apologizes for not noticing it before, makes immediate move to transfer to the business owner, who happened to also have an account on the same domain registrar platform. And the business owner is overjoyed and grateful that the mystery is solved and offers to pay for all those years that this other person had paid for the domain and any hosting charges. He would have, obviously, during those 10 years, if he'd been given an invoice, he would have paid for them. He's a really reasonable person. And you would think everybody lives happily ever after and now a bit wiser. Yeah, that would have been nice. But here's what transpired. Yes, there was an apology and the offer to pay, for all the years. So I kind of, just as an aside, I'm thinking like domain registration, let's say, if you round up, it'd be around $200. And if you were hosting a single page for 10 years on your own shared hosting, even if you charge $10 a month or $60 a year, you kind of combine those together, it would be around, $800? And by the way, I should note that this graphic person was, to my knowledge, compensated well, I could see myself, although I don't think everybody thinks this way. But like for me personally, if I had done that for 10 years, it would have cost less for me to host it for free than to create a monthly or yearly invoice, goodwill and all that. But so I'm putting a dollar amount to everything because it will perhaps put some perspective into things. Okay, so after the apology, the offer to compensate within 24 hours, suddenly it has now become a thing. Now, accidentally maintaining the company branded domain for almost 10 years, they had, by virtue of doing that, prevented other people from buying the domain, which would have only been a thing if she didn't renew it. This is me talking, or had she merely advised her client that they needed to kind of do it themselves, like, hey, here, I'm just a heads up, which would have probably been a professional thing to do. What is somebody else going to do with another brand's domain name? Probably nothing good. But apparently, an email from the client had implied a level of urgency and ownership that was a bridge too far. In response, immediately the brand name domain and apparently some others that were purchased also with the brand name were suddenly up for sale. No negotiation, no discussion, nothing that would even, as you can tell, reasonably make the case. Hey, my out-of-pocket was $800. How about $1,000 and it's all yours? But no, all of these domains were put up for sale. Now, before you be like me and go like, what happened? The good news is the domains are back in the control of the business owner after they purchased the domain from the registrar for $1,000. So does that number sound familiar? But now friendships are broken, emotions are high, and for what? I admit, I only know one side personally and professionally, but the case could be made that all that was required for the designer was simply to ask for $1,000 and make their case. And I know the owner would have been more than willing to pay it. In fact, probably been glad to have paid it. There was no need to bring gasoline in a match. Fortunately, I was watching from the sidelines through all this, and ultimately, the brand name is safe. And the brand owner, whether or not they wanted to, learned a valuable lesson about domain possession. Now, fortunately, for most of us, we only have to learn this once. We all, as SEOs, I know, have horror stories of domains, our clients' domains, that didn't get renewed. It wasn't us, the client was supposed to renew them, but that email was no longer viable. But personally, I'd never heard of this approach, and I'm guessing it isn't the first time it happened, but it was pretty stunning to me. But in the words of Italian race car drivers, what's behind you doesn't matter. So the next step is to create what I call, and I'm going to use air bunnies, in the event someone else needs to know this encrypted document, which will have all logins and passwords and details on anything that is set up to forward somewhere else, and schedule all renewals on a shared calendar. First weekend, and it was a doozy, but the first milestone was met. We know the account where the company domain is registered, and for me, that's been a good week. Well, thank you for being a listener. If you have any questions or comments about today's topic, you can reach out or text confessions at 512-222-3132. Indexilla is my indexer tool, and you can find it at indexilla.io. These features that were on the drawing board I told you about, they've now made it over into testing, and soon we'll have some additional capability. Become a member of my indexation group, Crawl or No Crawl. It's only $18 a month, and you get status reports to answer the question, is it me or is indexing off today? Starting this month, as a member perk, you can submit your indexation question or issue. I'll take a look at it. You can search for Crawl or No Crawl or find the link in the description. Thanks for listening, and until next week, I will see you in the SERPs.